Okay. I noticed recently that old Ed Lattimore has moved from Twitter to YouTube. I don't know if he got banned or, what prompted him to move from Twitter to YouTube and to try to develop uh, audience on YouTube very unsuccessfully. But I, of course, like to expose Ed at every possible turn as a grifter. You know, Ed said he's not a grifter. Yes, Ed's been grifting for years. He's trying to avoid work by being a life coach, and doing all this stuff. He started out with Mike Cernovich, believe it or not, and uh, he was Mike Cernovich's black friend for a long time, and then Mike got too big for him. I don't know what happened, if they split up or what happened, but or Mike went back to being faking being heterosexual. I don't know, but the long story short is Lattimore is on YouTube and he's wasting his time in terms of accomplishing anything because he's not going to garner a significant following. He's trying to go viral. He's trying to use a path that's been trodden many times before and it won't work anymore. But every now and then we like to check in on Ed and remind him he's still broke and he's still grifting and he's still a loser. It's been 7 years since I really went after Ed to point out that he was a dishonest, lazy grifter and so forth and so on. But I was insulting Ed as I like to do and telling him you actually got knocked out by a retard because Trey Morrison is not a very intelligent individual, and he had no amateur pedigree, and obviously he knocked Ed Lattimore out in the first round of Ed's second to last fight. And so I was insulting, Ed, having a good time, and then I realized, wait a minute, this retard really knocked you out? And I started thinking about it because he made a video describing his experience in this fight, which was very stupid. And I started watching the video. And he's a decorated amateur boxer. He's fought Dominic Brazil. He has a loss and a win against Dominic Brazil. Okay, and has a massive amateur pedigree. I didn't know as much about boxing then as I do now, and hadn't sparred as much, this and that, and didn't don't know didn't know as much about what I was looking at as I do now. And so at first it was just funny to watch Morrison knock him out, and then he quits boxing and goes to grifting, and trying to make better men, by emptying their wallets. He'll make you a better man by taking all your money. But it was very interesting. Now, as I see things through, I think Lattimore threw the fight for money. So, and this is by what he's saying, because he loses in the first round to a guy that didn't start boxing until he was in his mid 20s, and he loses in the guy's dad's hometown, Miami, Oklahoma. That's a little minor, tiny little fight capital. People go to the casinos there, but it's also like the central Morrison family fans. That's fan base. So it's not like it was his hometown, but it was basically his family's hometown, and there was a lot of fan interest in that area, and the Morrison name was keeping the promotion going basically. And Ed Lattimore is coming from out of town, like a lot of other black fighters have been imported, to basically lose to this Morrison. Only he's a much better boxer than Trey Morrison. So, and he's also a bigger guy than Morrison. Morrison's fat, but Ed's a naturally bigger, stronger guy than Morrison. And so I watched the fight. I'm not going to have it up on the screen because nobody will pay me to get a screen like that where I can, watch the fight as with with the viewer, with my viewer. But I watched the fight, and I'm watching Lattimore stand right in front of Morrison. He gets knocked down. He says he slipped, so he slipped. So obviously that didn't hurt him. Allegedly, he says he slipped, so it wasn't a real fall. So he slipped, and and he gets back up, and he stands right in front of Morrison, and then he gets hit for real, according to him. And he gets back up, and he stands right in front of Morrison, and he puts his hands up like this, and he moves to side, in like nobody does that anymore. Like he's Joe Frazier fighting, bobbing and weaving, and his hands aren't quite up as high as they need to be. They're like right here or right here even. They look like they're up, but they're not really up. And Morrison tags him again, and I think the referee calls the fight off there or whatever. But he, in every case, he doesn't try to move away. He doesn't try to use his jab. He doesn't do any of that. He stands in front of Morrison. So this is clearly a fixed fight. And then the icing on the cake, he says the next morning his promoter fired him. The next morning his promoter dropped him. This guy is like 14-1 or 13-1. And he goes and loses. He decides to take a dive in the first round to Tommy Morrison. So I don't think the promoter dropped him, because boxing is fixed. It's fake. It's not real. And we're going to get into that more in a little bit. But because I'm going to talk about how we think he sold the knockout. But boxing is fake, but the promoter does not want you, a rising young boxing guy. If you're going to lose, you don't want to lose by KO in the first round, okay? And you don't want to lose in the guy's hometown, That just looks bad. If you lost a hard-fought decision or whatever, you carried him and let him knock you out in the 12th round or something, that's one thing. But you lose a knockout in the first round, that's retarded. That's just stupid. And that's an exemplification of why Ed has never managed to make any money, and why he's on YouTube right now getting 1,000 views on his videos after all these years of grifting. And he's selfish to a fault. And so he probably took a very small amount of money to lay down for Trey Morrison. The promoter got him, the local promoter got him to take a very small amount of money to lay down. And he basically ruined his whole career for a very small, he sold his birthright for a mess of pottage. Basically, and that's why his promoter dropped him. He said, hey, if you're going to be this stupid about managing your affairs, it's not worth keeping you, under this promotion. And I think that's what happened. Now, contrast this with Hassan Rahman Jr. fighting Trey's brother, and that was a kind of a BS stoppage too. But I think it was in the 8th or 9th round. He's throwing his jab the whole fight. He's moving around. At no point does Ed ever move around when he's hurt. At no point does Ed try to get away from him when he's hurt. At no point does Ed try to fight off the ropes. And this is a guy with an amateur pedigree, so he knows how to move around. Like an extensive amateur. Like he tried out for the Olympics. Lost to Dominic Brazil. Dominic Brazil is his friend, supposedly. And then he goes and loses to Trey Morrison in the first round in Trey's hometown. Yeah, that's a fixed fight. So we start looking at, and I don't have it on the screen. If you wanted to pay me some money, we could arrange for some better production, but not until then. So looking at it on the screen, he doesn't look right. If you look at him, compare him to now. It's true that his last fight, he had one other fight after this, and I believe it was a draw. Yeah, it was a draw, which is gay. As is Eddie. Ed is clearly gay. Where'd you ever run into a black man named Ed Lattimore, who was homeless, allegedly, you know, been blowing Cernovich for years. Uh, in any case, or it's possible he and Cernovich went out together and blew trannies. It's hard to say, but in any case, what happens with Lattimore? Lattimore has one more fight, and he looks terrible in it too. But in this fight, he just doesn't look himself. So I would speculate he drugged himself to sell the loss better. And now, the only place you could sell that is in Miami, Oklahoma. Okay, there's not another place in the country you could sell a loss like that. What was it? Ivan Baranko or whatever Baranchik was out of Miami, and he was, supposedly this dead, middleweight who was like Triple G, real slugger. As soon as he fights out of a regional level, he gets destroyed. But he was like their up and coming star. And this, in a lot of ways, they've never managed to develop any talent out of my Oklahoma. Well, Jared Anderson. I believe Jared Anderson was out of Oklahoma. That's where you get a law, LMAO. Jared Anderson. How'd that work out? So yeah, no boxing talent out of Oklahoma that was able to emerge onto a national stage. So the point of the matter is that I think Ed Lattimore might have taken some Benadryl or something like that to make him a little off because he was going to go down. Maybe it eased his pain in getting knocked out or buzzed anyway. I don't think he got knocked out. I think he got buzzed, but or he just went down. Once Trey started fighting any serious fights, Trey couldn't knock anybody out. It turned out, he did not have the knockout power, and neither did Kenzie. Honestly, most of their knockouts were rigged. They were either fighting guys who were way smaller than them, or guys who were had to lay down for them. We watched that black guy basically get coerced to lay down for his brother. Was that in Miami? That was in Joplin. Yeah, you were there. Yeah. That black guy could have gone on and knocked his brother out. So the Morrison brothers KO power is greatly overrated. And, but the point of the matter is, Ed decided to do that to sell the fight or sell his, what do you call it when you do the job for somebody in wrestling? Sell the bump.
A work.
Sell the work, yeah. It was a work. It was a fixed fight. It was a fake. And Ed did it for almost no money. If you got to be 20-1, you might have gotten, $50,000. But no, Ed couldn't wait. Ed had to have the money when Ed had to get this $500 or whatever extra for laying down in the 13th fight of his career, where he's 13-0. And he lays down for Trey Morrison. And so, yeah, that clearly, whether he drugged himself or not, or, that clearly was a fixed fight. And if he slipped, chances are it was because he drugged himself on purpose to sell the fight or sell the work. And so that's the kind of person you were dealing with, Ed Lattimore. And, it's, I believe it's doing, it's God's work to expose Eddie periodically. Obviously there's a sucker born every second in the United States, and, Ed's there to, suck them dry, but, and he will too for the right money. Boy, that was,
That was a good segue.
yeah, that was a good segue. I was actually talking about the cheerleaders, but that's another. That was the segue I was talking about. But in any case, this has been a public service announcement by you-know-who, Dr. Brecht. I need you to donate generously because I'm not a grifter, but I do need your money or something.